everyone, and welcome to our first ever ACYA podcast, the Alumni Perspective. So every month, we connect with the distinguished alumni of ACYA and have a conversation about a relevant issue in today's society. So in this podcast, we will be talking about China and soft power. And joining us today, we have Daniel Bloch. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Fantastic. So Daniel, let's just get right into it right now. So tell us a bit about you, what you have done, and an exciting fact about yourself that you'd like to share with us all.
Well, so I grew up in Perth, Western Australia, but probably from the age of 15, had my mind set on seeking out an international educational experience for university. So within my area in academics of business and international relations, I actually ended up in Madrid, Spain, of all places, studying a double degree in business and international relations at a place called IE University, which is a very entrepreneurial, practical business school in the heart of Madrid. Over the years, I've increasingly specialized towards my area in aviation. And this is becoming an industry of real relevance, I think, in the 21st century, because it really does foster the globalized lifestyle that we've come to love and treasure. It, at the end of the day, is what brings people together from different parts of the world, but it also facilitates global supply lines. It becomes a resemblance or a symbol for national cultures and heritage. And at the end of the day is also something that drives our experiences and travel, these things that we love. And so you asked me an exciting fact about myself is almost something that has come out as a product of this recent situation with the coronavirus outbreak, and is that in the past month, I've become a business owner.
So great and welcome. So today we'll be talking about China and soft power. Could you just tell us what soft power is and where China is placed in this conversation?
Sure. So the easiest way to describe soft power is to actually understand what hard power is, its conceptual opposite. So this is in the context of international relations and geopolitics. So hard power is your military power from a state and national perspective. It's your ability to influence others, and by others I mean other states, other countries, through hard coercive means, so namely your military. So if that is your hard power, your soft power is your ability to influence through non-coercive means. And this comes through a range of different factors, things like language, pop culture. You even look at something as seemingly trivial as the Hollywood movie industry or a Starbucks coffee, things that are attached to your society, but yet hold intrinsic power when you are able to then export that to different parts of the world. Now, the reason why this concept is so important at the moment in China is that it's sort of what stands between China from getting to that place of global hegemon as a sort of real superpower, because invariably they absolutely have the economic strength. The political strength is certainly gaining, and this really ties into the hard power argument. It's in this idea of the carrot and the stick. You've got the stick to reinforce, but you need the incentive which comes from the carrot. And essentially that can be delivered through soft power. And some have argued that China have really sort of fallen back a little bit on the soft power play. And so ever since President Xi has come into his time in office, he's made a very concerted effort to increase China's soft power play. You've seen through the launch of the Confucian Institute, or the expansion of the Confucian Institute, trying to encourage more countries to offer Chinese as a more standard language to seek out. Chinese film has been pushed out into different markets. I think recently Disney in one of their movies had, those little intro clips. I think it was a movie called Bao, if I'm not mistaken. Before, it might have been Toy Story. I can't remember exactly, but even that is a little soft power play. And essentially what you're finding there is you're needing people to become more comfortable with the culture, more understanding. But coming back to China, really soft power is what is going to launch them. And it's what you're also seeing a little bit in the Belt and Road Initiative, in which not only do you see China trying to develop stronger socio-economic ties in these regions through trade agreements and free movement agreements, but equally it's like a soft power ploy. You're trying to establish better social relations with these people. You're seeing more, for example, freedom and, for example, tourism opportunities between one another. You're seeing more integration between the two cultures, and hopefully that generates trust. It generates more interaction, and ultimately this idea of soft power.
So one of the ways that China has become to strengthen its soft power, you mentioned in one of your theses, is commercial aviation. Now, can you tell us a bit more about commercial aviation and what that delineation really sits, and how this concept is becoming more relevant?
Sure. So the overlap between commercial aviation and soft power, in my eyes, and this is what I really did explain in quite a lot of depth in my international relations thesis, is that a country can really export its message and its symbols through the strategic use of its flagship national carrier. Now, a really good example of this can be, for example, Emirates and the United Arab Emirates in the Gulf state. Now, this is a very famous carrier. Most people, if, for example, you've been flying from Australia or China over to Europe, strong chance have connected through Dubai on an Emirates plane. And they've been able to export a certain message of luxury, high quality, adventure, being tied to Real Madrid and all these different global symbols that are consumed globally, understood globally. And as a result, that's generated a lot of comfort. So all of a sudden, you've taken a country like the United Arab Emirates, which people might have some concerns about, and you've then generated a new image through the strategic use of the airline, which they've globally exported to different parts of the world. And so what I've done with China and the notion of soft power commercial aviation is drawn the dots a little bit, because you've got three existing factors which really lend itself to quite a strong opportunity for China. Because on the one hand, we can see that soft power can be generated through the strategic use of a national carrier. You've then got China in its position as the to-be largest airline industry in the world by passenger movements. And this has come out through the International Air Transport Association, or IATA, who've essentially predicted China is going to overtake the US in the next sort of 5 to 10 years as the world's largest commercial aviation market by numbers. And then from there, you're just essentially bringing the dots together and saying, well, we can see that soft power can be generated. We can see China's been focusing on soft power and needing to find different ways to bring it up, and that their aviation industry is scaled to a point in which it is almost unrivaled. And so you're just essentially drawing the dots together and seeing the opportunity that is there in front of you. And then if I can elaborate a little bit further and tie it back again with the Belt and Road Initiative concept, which I was talking to you about, and how that can feed into the soft power play as well. And actually, ironically enough, my paper's title is called the Belt, Road and Runway Initiative. Because in my opinion, I think aviation can be used as a tool to help develop these countries that lie along the Belt and Road, often in Central Asia and often also landlocked, thereby heightening the importance of commercial aviation to be that facilitator of trade and supply lines, of getting them from major capital to major capital, because obviously in landlocked countries you've got different challenges for mobility. And often these countries have very underfunded, underdeveloped, and frankly, cost overrunning airline industries, which are a real pain for their governments to operate. So China, who's got such a scaled amount of resources and expertise, can go into these partners, remember, these are trade partners, and say, look, we can come and help you. We can help build up your airports, help your infrastructure, train your pilots, train your management. And that way we are not only heightening the prospects of our Belt and Road Initiative, lending itself to more trade, more efficient movement, et cetera, you're leaving a lasting impact in these countries that lie on the Belt and Road. And of course, that's going to generate trust, that's going to generate interaction, and that's going to generate soft power. So this is the premise of the idea.
So in your thesis, you also go into a bit about depth about how China has the ability to become a front runner, and you spoken that previously about how it can become a leader in commercial aviation. And what is the reason, comparing to Emirates and what you understand, that how can China and how can Chinese airlines, what do they really need to do to achieve success and growth in commercial aviation?
Sure. And so it's funny because the overlap for what Chinese airlines need to do to really create a stronghold in the international market is similar to what China as a country has to do to create a stronghold on the market. And that is to improve, if you want to again label it as their soft power, then that's possibly quite an accurate way. They need to become more catered to an international market. Now, the thing about China is their airlines have been built up off of a very strong domestic product. I mean, at the end of the day, when you have a domestic market of a country that has 1 billion people in population plus, you're not going to struggle to fill aircrafts on domestic flights. But of course, they've still got international aspirations. The problem is, though, the reason why they've really struggled historically in attracting international markets is because it's a very foreign experience for a lot of people coming onto a Chinese airline. And that spans even little symbols. Things like you will struggle to find English, or the Chinese characters will be far more prominent than instructions or magazines, or even the aircraft livery on the outside. The Chinese characters are far more apparent than the English markings. You compare that to Emirates and you think of the Emirates livery on the aircraft, the big gold Emirates is in gold, and then the Arabic is just small on the side. That's been strategically developed. On board on Emirates, they make an effort every time to say, on board today, we have 10 staff that speak 14 languages from X amount of countries. And, the captain has, if he's not a native speaker, or she's not a native speaker of English, has clearly done well to be trained and to having quite a neutral accent. The point is, you need to be doing things that are going to make people feel comfortable, because soft power comes from comfort levels in many different ways. You have to trust and understand what's going on. Now, if people don't understand, it's not that they mistrust what's going on, but there's a certain level of, you could almost say, unease. And so even something like food, for example, if there's only Chinese options and maybe people feel a little bit put off by this again can make people decide to go for a different airline. So what I'm trying to say is the Chinese carriers, and particularly what I call the MC3, the major 3 Chinese carriers. So that's Air China, China Eastern, and China Southern, which are based out of Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou, respectively. And these are really the major trunk international route airline carriers of China. They need to start developing a product that is more consumable for more international markets if they're to really capitalize on their position.
So the final thing we want to be discussing is, what are the major roadblocks that China as a country faces?
So again, it does tie a little bit into the previous question, where you want to be developing a product that is more recognizable and consumable for international passengers. But I think it's just dispelling any worries that China is often falsely associated with, low quality. I mean, increasingly with Xi's focus on soft power, we've also seen a shift towards trying to get the perspective of China to be less about a made in China, rather a made by China, and that China can ultimately be a mark of quality rather than a mark of mass production. And so part of that also comes in, for example, the type of aircraft that are operated in China. Now, ironically, the Chinese carriers have been ordering a tremendous amount of very modern, state-of-the-art aircraft. And so people have to be seeing this and exposed to this, of course, to recognize the fact that, things like safety and cleanliness really aren't an issue, because there are, of course, stigmas and reputations that do go around. But if enough PR and concerted efforts can be made to get this across, that, hey, we actually are not susceptible to these kind of issues that you might suspect, then you might just find that it becomes a more intriguing prospect. Because one thing that China can do is offer very low prices, which is obviously a major selling point in the aviation industry. From a customer perspective, price sensitivity is often the major deciding factor in which airline one decides to take. And the fact that these three major airlines in China, the three major international carriers, are all government owned and operated, means that they've got deep pockets, which means that they can afford to push down the prices, even if it's a loss-making route for a little while, to attract more international customers, to then say, look, we've actually got a competitive product which does rival the major carriers, your Singapore Airways, your Emirates, your Qatar, your Cathay Pacific, whatever it might be. And so really, it's about breaking down the stigma. It's about attracting the international customers, getting them to take a punt on you. And then when you do get them, making sure that you have the product in place that's going to be able to keep them.